Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very warm welcome to this evening's Hire's weekly webinar. My name is Pallavi Dwivedi, and I'm the founder of Hire. I welcome all of you to those of you who've not been here before. I welcome you to Hire. Hire is an online professional development platform for K-12 educators. For those of you who have been regulars at our weekly webinars, welcome back and thank you so much for all the consistent support and encouraging enthusiasm that you display every week, week on week, which you've been doing for the last 8 months. It's fantastic to see the turnout every week that we get both on the Zoom session as well as after the session is over on our Facebook group. So thank you, teachers, for all of that amazing support. And it's fabulous to see how committed you are to your own professional development and that this commitment is only growing. So I welcome all of you to today's session. I'm going to get us all started by very quickly sharing some housekeeping rules with all of you before anything else. This webinar, as always, is meant to be interactive, but we can't see you. The panelists are not able to see any of the participants, and we don't use the raise your hand feature. But what we do ask all of you to do as participants is to use the Q&A box and the chat box as extensively, as much as you can. You can post your suggestions, you can post your questions, you can post your own comments and feedback on what the panelists are saying, and also talk to one another, engage with one another. We also encourage a lot of healthy debate. So if there are things that you'd like to thrash out with each other, please go right ahead and do it. But we do also expect that you will extend all the required courtesies and be extremely kind on the platform. There's not enough kindness around in the world, and let's try and see if we can add to that. Webinar recordings and PPTs, as always, will be emailed to all of you. To all those of you who have registered for today's session, these will be available via email. To all those of you who are joining us via the live stream on our Facebook group, you will all be able to access this session even after the session is over on our Facebook group itself and also on our YouTube channel, and the PPTs will also be available on our website. We do offer certificates, of course, but there's a catch. If you would want a certificate, which a lot of you have been sending in your submissions for over the last couple of weeks, which is extremely exciting for us to see. It's great to see how the webinars are inspiring in all of you these fantastic ideas that you're taking back into your classrooms and converting into great lessons or into activities that you do with your students, or simply just offering you a chance to reflect on everything that you've learned today. So 3 ways in which you can get our certificate of appreciation. The first one is you can send us a sketch note or a drawing based on today's session. You can send us a classroom activity or idea inspired by something that today's panelists are going to be talking about. Or you could send us a 150-word reflection. Just a word of caution though, simply sending in screenshots of panelist PPTs or simply regurgitating something that the panelist says does not qualify as a suitable response. So we do want you to think about what's being talked about here today. We do want you to go back and reflect on it. We do want you to go back and think how you can apply this in your classrooms and what this changes about your classroom teaching strategy or practice. That's what we really want to see. And you can submit your entries all the way up until tomorrow, which is Saturday at 6 p.m. India time. The link for submitting your responses will pop up automatically at the end of this session via a Google form. So you'll be able to access it then and there. We'll also put the link out in the chat towards the end of the session. It'll also come by email when we send out the session resources. So that's about how you get a certificate, but now let's appreciate some people who did send in their responses from last week's session. This is a list of our super contributors from last week's session on mindfulness as a student habit. So just very quickly wanted to give a huge shout out to these wonderful educators who have submitted beautiful pieces of work. Emmeline Clement from the Khaitan Public School, Saibabad, Hyderabad, Raminder Dhupar from the Icon Public School, Ahmedabad, Hima Arora from Shiv Nadar School, Noida, Pinky Agarwal from Glendale Academy, Hyderabad, Satya Karunakaran from the Pupil Savita Eco School in Chennai. So that's from all corners of the country. Here's what these wonderful teachers submitted. Emmeline sent us these amazing happiness jars that her students have been putting their little happiness moments into and collecting them. Of course, Raminder sent us this amazing mind map where she's put out all her ideas from the session, and she's created a great little visual for all of us to be able to see. Hima again sent us a fantastic mind map for mindfulness and how she's planning on using some of this in her own classroom. Pinky's idea of this emotional bank account was really beautiful, where her children make deposits of negative emotions, of positive emotions, and withdrawals of negative emotions, thereby getting the kids to actually recognize and name their emotions. And last but not the least is this fabulous hand-drawn, it's a mind map or a sketch note, whatever it is that you'd like to call it, which was done by Satya Karunakaran. So thank you, teachers. These were some fantastic responses. Please keep them coming. It gives us something to look forward to over the weekend as well. And it also gives us a great sense of what you're doing in your classroom. So thank you for that. Coming to today's session. Today, we're going to be talking about, talking. How is it that you, as educators in your classrooms, can become more effective communicators? And of course, all of us as educators recognize the fact that classroom communication is not and should not be a one-way street. We must look at classroom education or classroom conversation as teachers being enablers of that. And how is it that we can get our students to get more engaged in talking to one another, talking to you as the teacher? How do we go about creating an environment that's conducive for this two-way dialogue? And what does this effective communication cycle really look like? So today's panelists have spent a lot of time doing a lot of thinking and a lot of research into exactly this. And we also have joining us a very surprise last minute entry joining us today. So I'm just very quickly going to introduce you to not two, but three of our panelists for today. So please join me first in welcoming Brianna Gray. Brianna is the author of Talking in Class, and she also heads the Professional Learning and Growth at ACS International Schools in London and Doha. She has been, along with our second panelist today, who I'll introduce in just a second, she's been doing a lot of thinking and insight and building insight into student dialogue in classrooms. And her book, of course, which is available on the iBookstore, is a great repository of fantastic ideas and resources on how you can initiate classroom talk. Joining us next also is Jake Roche. Jake is the co-author of Talking in Class along with Brianna. He is Director of Educational Technology at the Collège du Le Mans in Geneva, Switzerland. Jake, of course, has worked with Brianna on putting together, again, fantastic resources and insights into how you can build effective classroom communication. The third panelist, of course, is no stranger to all those of you who are regulars at higher webinars. Please join me in welcoming Mansa Pandey. Mansa is a transformation coach and a veteran teacher, educator, and trainer. Mansa is also a Cambridge certified English language expert and is widely experienced in developing classroom communication skills, both for educators as well as for students. So that's our fantastic panel for today. And with that, I'm going to call our conversation open for discussion, about discussion. And I'd like to invite our first two panelists, Brianna and Jake, to take us through how is it that they encourage dialogue in their own classrooms. What are some of their insights into what makes classroom communication effective? So over to you, Brianna and Jake.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be here talking about talking today. We are actually going to start this off with a poll, if you don't mind. Let's go ahead, and I'll put my slides up as well, but let's lay out what are the things that get in our way of the different aspects of communication in our classrooms. So let me go ahead, let's put this up too. If you are on the Zoom and you want to enter into the poll responses there, please feel free. If you're on Facebook, you can use section. But with teacher talk, what do you think is the most difficult aspect of leading a lecture style lesson? Right? If you're doing direct instruction, where do you find that there are some barriers or things that you would like to change? And then Jake, do you want to talk about our second question?
Yeah, the second question, when you think about student-to-student conversation activities, what is the biggest barrier you face? So what makes it the most difficult to get the students to talk to each other during class?
All right, we'll give that a couple of seconds.
Let people answer.
Cool, okay. And as the answers are coming in, I think that one of the things that we have found in our work, both prior to a pandemic and a shift to online learning, and now in our current environment, whether it's socially distanced classrooms in person or fully distance learning from home, is that we have a lot of common challenges that we're facing when we think about both the way we communicate with our students and the way our students communicate with each other. But what we'd like to suggest is that we can use structured student dialogue opportunities to really address and overcome some of those barriers. And if we can set them up correctly, there we go, some more results coming in. If we can set these up correctly, we have found that we can really reach success through getting students to talk to each other about what they're learning, and we can still meet all of our objectives and sometimes surpass those when we let go a bit of the teacher talk time.
Yeah, and through our research, this is what we found. We found content understanding increases when you incorporate student-to-student dialogue activities. So students are learning more if you let them talk about the content. Academic language use grows stronger when you allow students to talk during class in these activities that we're going to show you today. So we'll talk a little bit more about what academic language is in a little bit. We find students are more deeply engaged. We've had students stay after class to continue a discussion that they were really interested in about a topic. And, you know, as a teacher, that's what it's all about. That's thrilling. And then lastly, you find new ways to assess students. You know, we talk a lot about assessing writing, assessing reading, but how often do we assess student conversation? And so we're going to give you some tools to assess student conversations as well.
But how do we set that up? How do we set it up when we're in person with our students, when there is no concern about staying safe with keeping students paired together? How do we set that up when we're working in distance environments? We find that really focusing on these 7 features and considering these as sort of the foundations of all of the design for student engagement opportunities is the quickest way to make sure that you have everything set for success. So number one, you have to find a way to require both partners to talk. We talk a lot about dialogue, and that is a two-way flow. It needs to be an exchange of information, and you need to set it up very deliberately so that they're both engaged equally.
Yeah, number 5 here is all about work worth doing. Is the conversation that you're requiring students to have, is that leading to something? Is that essential to your curriculum? So that's what number 5 is all about, work worth doing.
And in 2020, personalized learning, it's a hot topic, it's essential. So how do you provide choice and ownership to build that buy-in from your students? And it really can be something as simple as, rather than giving them one prompt to discuss, maybe you offer a choice of 2 or 3 questions to guide their thinking, and you let them decide how they're going to steer that. And even just some little opportunities to build in choice can provide enough shared ownership that students want to engage more deeply, and it leads to a much richer conversation more quickly.
So this is our overlapping variations of language, and this is just the way we look at language. And you can see that what we want teachers to focus on is what we call general academic language. We feel like this is essential for success in the classroom. These are words like conclusion, words that will go across all content areas. And it really is these words that allow students to reach greater heights of academic achievement. Of course, there are your very content-specific words. For example, a science language word might be mitosis. It's really only useful to that subject area. Calculate might be important for both math and science. And then foundations of home and community. This is the language that students use at home. So slang, other languages that students might speak that isn't the target language at school is the home and community language. And sometimes these overlap greatly with general academic language, and sometimes they don't overlap at all. So this is just a snapshot of one student's language. And you can see this student here, their math language, they have a lot of math language. They know a lot of math words. Their vocabulary in math is quite high, but their vocabulary in literature language is much smaller. So this is how we like to look at academic language.
And all of these are just things for you to consider as you're providing opportunities for students to speak with each other. So what's the purpose of the conversation? Are you trying to build their general academic language? Are you trying to get them to use the vocabulary that you've just outlined in a sentence? Being as deliberate as possible makes it clearer for the students, and it also gets you to your goal a little bit quicker. All of these things are setting up what we like to call structures for success, right? We would never suggest that you put a group of 4 students in the hall and say, go talk about something. Here you're going to learn, about, if we want to say mitosis, go have a conversation about it. Instead, we need to make sure that we're really clearly outlining for them what it is that we need them to see. So if we want to ensure engagement and on-task participation, which means, as Jake mentioned earlier, a quicker dive into that content knowledge, modeling as step 1, what you'd like your students to do is going to be critical. And there's a number of different ways you can model it. And this doesn't take an entire lesson's worth of time. I mean, we're talking a 5-minute model, but let the students see what your expectations are.
Yeah, we also believe providing sentence starters is key in structuring your peer dialogue. And that could be as simple as writing some sentence starters yourself, teacher generated, or asking the class, what are some ways you might start a sentence or a statement or a question to participate in the dialogue? And then also visual cues. When students are in a discussion, walking around the classroom, maybe pointing to those sentence starters and saying, why don't you try that? And that will jumpstart the conversation again.
And then we have to address behavior. You'll notice that we haven't yet recommended that you explicitly teach some of the classic communication skills, things like eye contact or yes and building on conversations. Those all come in pieces. But before we offer our students the opportunity to engage in paired dialogue, we need to explicitly outline what the productive behaviors we expect to see them engaging in are. And then on the flip side, a little less time on it, but still an acknowledgement of the non-productive behaviors that we'd like to see. So we often offer out a behavior checklist for our students, particularly if it's at the start of their experience with student dialogue. Give them a list, give them a check where they can self-monitor, or if you're doing a paired conversation, put a third person in the pair to just be an observer and to make notes and provide feedback about the productive or non-productive behaviors that they've seen as an external observer. You can also, as a teacher, have your own list and take momentary snapshots where you pause and listen into different student conversations and make a note yourself of the productive and non-productive behaviors that you might be observing.
Yeah, a lot of teachers are using breakout rooms online, whether in Zoom or Microsoft Teams. This would be a great tool to monitor those breakout rooms to make sure students are having the right kind of conversation. And that could be putting a third student in the breakout room to just evaluate, or you as the teacher going into the breakout rooms and just observing a conversation and evaluating it. When I was teaching, I would just walk around with the clipboard, and I didn't tell the students who I was evaluating or which group I was evaluating, but I would just pick one, and that would really help students stay on task.
Okay, we're gonna try to put this in a little bit of context for you, because this all feels a little bit theoretical, like, yes, I understand some of the structures I need to consider when I'm setting this up, but we've said, and we deeply believe, that students will learn more when they're able to talk about what they're learning. We've seen it happen time and time and time again in all of our research. How can that actually look for you? So to set the scene, we're going to imagine that Jake and I are students in a class together, and the first task that we've undertaken is that we read an article independently. And as the advanced learners that we are, our article last night for homework was to read about asynchronous versus synchronous learning online. All right, so we read our article on our own. And we know that step 3 is going to be that we're going to write an essay about our thoughts about asynchronous versus synchronous learning. Yeah, but between there, we're going to engage in a dialogue opportunity. So we're going to do this activity where we're going to be able to elaborate and clarify our own thinking on the subject using some vocabulary that is new to us from the article. And once we've been able to really pin down and articulate our thoughts behind the article, we'll be able to write our essay. Yeah. Now, a fourth step, kind of our extension, something that we've seen that works really, really nicely is once you're done with your essay or your poster or your PowerPoint slide, rather than having a whole class presentation, we find it works really well to put students back in pairs again and have them do just an individual presentation where they can engage in like kind of a question and answer session around those presentations, and you don't get that situation where they switch off when they're watching the 23rd presentation. But we're going to skip all the way back to number 2. This is where we're focusing. So we've read our article, synchronous versus asynchronous learning, and now we're going to try one of the talking in class activities. And you're going to play
one of our activities. You can find this activity on our website, this template. But today we're going to have you participate as well. So what we need you to do is on a piece of paper or on your iPad or something, we need you to draw a line on your paper. This is a continuum. So go ahead and do that now. I'm going to use this one as kind of the official one, but we want you to have an unofficial continuum on a piece of paper. So go ahead and write that, draw that line now on your paper, if you have one. Some people are probably scrambling at home, but that's okay. And on the top of my paper, I would write, what is your opinion on synchronous versus asynchronous learning? And on this side, I would write synchronous. And on this side, I would write asynchronous. Okay.
All right, I've got my example. So everyone's going to play along at home. If we were all in the same space, you'd be in breakout rooms trying this yourself. But instead, I'm going to use these sentence starters. I would put a timer up on the board. This is going to be a 3-minute conversation max. I'm going to use the sentence starters to try to figure out where I can place Jake on the continuum between enjoying synchronous or asynchronous learning more. All right, so somewhere he exists on here, and I'm going to help him clarify his thoughts using my question starters and maybe bringing in some key vocabulary. All right, Jake.
All right.
What is your opinion on doing synchronous versus asynchronous learning?
After reading that article, I really like synchronous. I really like synchronous.
Can you elaborate on why you find synchronous to be such a good experience?
Yeah, because I miss being in the classroom with everybody. I miss seeing my teacher. I miss, everybody in the class, seeing what everybody's wearing that day. It's just more exciting.
So can you tell me more about the things particularly that you find exciting when you are live in the class with your teacher and peers? Well,
we might have a class discussion or something. Yeah, and to be honest, sometimes it's not very exciting, I guess, now that I think about it. Sometimes the teacher's going on and on. Maybe it's like 30 slides that they're going through. And then I just turn off my microphone and my camera, and I can do something else, which is kind of nice.
Okay, so why is it then important for you to be able to do something on your own when you want to?
Well, for example, my math teacher, I'm not doing very well in math, recorded a way to solve a problem. And I must have watched that video 20 times until I understood it. But now I know how to do it. So I was doing that on my own. So I guess that was asynchronous.
Like blended learning? Like when I was watching the video on the cell parts when I was in my class last spring?
Yeah, like that. It's really helpful. And I think I'll probably use that video again to review for the big test next week.
Okay, so do you have an example of when it would be better to do synchronous learning?
I think, if a teacher is introducing a new unit or topic, and we can all come together kind of at a starting point to begin. But then you're right, it's actually, well, after thinking about it, I realize it's quite nice to move at my own pace because, I can watch the videos again until I understand before I move on.
Timer's going off. Sorry. Okay, so we have to stop there for our timer. And now I've got my paper. And I think that Jake is probably pretty close to synchronous in terms of his preferences, but he might be a little bit more towards the middle than he thought in the beginning. And Jake, are you now prepared to write your essay?
Yeah, I've got loads of good ideas.
I definitely find that by having a timer and by really limiting and focusing the conversation, there's not an opportunity to get off task, because you do have to submit some written piece of work in the end of that short period of time, and there really hasn't been a chance. And I know that we're adults and we're modeling this for you, but we have seen this work in literally all age levels of students. And if there's something quite powerful about seeing, someone who's 10 years old say, could you please elaborate on that last point? And it's something that I would certainly encourage you to try, even if it feels slightly uncomfortable or like you aren't certain how the students are going to take to it. But there are certainly, hopefully you can see some structures to put into place for success. I think we're going to pass over to Mensa and then hopefully come back and answer any questions that we can on that.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Brianna and Jake. That was absolutely amazing. There was so much to unpack, and we really liked that that conversation that both of you just just did for us to demonstrate how it is that students can actually, or teachers can actually undertake these leading questions in their own classrooms. That was absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for that. There are a couple of questions that have come in, which I thought I'll just raise to all three of you. So if you could, answer these. The first one is, of course, about something which all of us are wondering, given that a lot of schools are moving to hybrid teaching, where some of the kids are in class, in person, some others are online learning, remotely. How do we encourage dialogue in those situations? And how is it that we as teachers can communicate effectively across both of these groups?
I can say I've been operating in all of these different sorts of styles, and it is absolutely a challenge. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. Breakout groups are kind of the easy answer. Using an opportunity to model, even if you're in a whole group of synchronous learning, but you can actually get really creative with, it doesn't have to be a verbal video conversation. If you put two students in a shared doc space or a slide space, they can engage in a dialogue chat that still builds these conversation skills. There are plenty of ways that you can be creative, but you're right, it does take an extra wiggle, even in the same space when you can't be close to each other. The classroom gets noisy if you're in a distanced in-person classroom, and you just sort of have to roll with that and say, you know what, I'm going to put this timer up, and we're not going to be able to hear each other until 5 minutes has passed, and then you're going to need to be silent and come back with me.
Absolutely. That's really great. Mansa, I'm going to come to you, Mansa, in just 1 second with another question that I know you will want to answer even in your presentation. But, Tanvinder was asking on the forum whether we have any other strategies apart from breakout rooms to encourage these conversations in class during remote learning. So do any of you want to talk about distance learning projects or anything else? Jake, if you want to talk about any other strategy that we have up your sleeve other than breakout rooms.
Other than breakout rooms, one thing that you could do is you could go ahead and you could model that conversation online, and then you could have those students at home, make them go and have that student with somebody in their house. Make them have that conversation with their mom or dad with the template, and figure out where their parent is on that continuum, and then report back to the class. That'd be a good way to kind of tie home and school together that we don't often have an opportunity to do.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for those ideas. There's another question that's coming from Rolly, who's talking about how we can avoid student interruptions. What is it that we can do with students who are continuously interrupting the class? This could also be, of course, we know that one straight up option is to just mute the kid. But we give it, considering the fact that we'll soon be going into, either a hybrid lesson, or even when we go back to brick-and-mortar classrooms or in-person classrooms, how do we engage interruptive students into positive dialogue?
What I would do is, when you're modeling that conversation, pull that student up to have the modeled conversation with them. And then maybe turn it around and have them go and assess other conversations. Because maybe when they're assessing other students interrupting, they'll realize, how difficult that can be. And they can also see how pleasant it is when students are having an interesting discussion that's back and forth. So the assessor could actually become the learner. Yeah,
absolutely. Brianna, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, in the one that Jake and I just modeled, if the student who likes to talk is the interviewer, the person asking the questions, there comes a time where you have to stop speaking. Your only role there is to ask the questions, and we have a different activity that is a pure interview, and you must wait till you have a response from your partner before you can continue on to your piece.
Absolutely. So yeah, so putting kids who tend to interrupt others into the heart of that particular activity often works really well. This also works when students who tend to not speak a lot, or who are quiet, and you'd like to give them center stage or give them a chance to sort of showcase what they know. It does work to boost their confidence and their enthusiasm as well. So that's also it works both ways, for kids who talk a lot and for kids who don't talk at all. There's one other question that's come in from Bindu, who's asking, how is it that we can incorporate this structure when we've got a mixed group of students or a heterogeneous group of students who've got different learning abilities? So how do we work with these kinds of structures with mixed ability students, which is essentially every classroom?
Yeah, and I'm a former special education teacher. Jake worked with English language learners, so we are very comfortable with mixed groups. And I think there's a couple different strategies. We found that sometimes if someone is still building a skill and they're really uncomfortable, maybe they've just moved to a country and they're just getting used to the language, giving them that observer role who provides feedback afterwards for the first couple of tries helps to build their confidence. But I really want to stress the paired nature of this. I think that the second you try a group of 4 or a group of 5 students, you quickly have 1 or 2 who are going to dominate and 1 or 2 who are going to hold back. If it's a paired dialogue, you must contribute, and it's up to you as the teacher to decide, is it more important that I put 2 students who might have extended thought process on this? Should I put those 2 together, or should I put that student with a child who might need more support, and even play with it? And I think you might be surprised at the results of the sort of, it becomes almost a mentorship experience for those students.
Absolutely.
And you're requiring both partners to talk. So imagine in that scenario, if I was new and maybe I was struggling with the language, Brianna would still need to put me on that continuum. So she would really be helping me to identify where I am on that continuum and really listening, because she has that job to do to figure out where I am. So that's another way that we see students. Some students don't like to talk just because they know it's not really going anywhere or they're going to be interrupted. But when they need to provide the information, they will.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you both for that. And on that note, I know Mansa's already picked up a couple of these strands and will want to address them in her presentation. So I'm going to pass over now to Mansa to talk about how is it that teachers can lead effective communication in the classroom. So over to you, Mansa.
Thank you, Pallavi. I just tried to share my screen. Good evening, everybody.
And teachers, you can keep your questions coming in the chat as well as in the Q&A box. We'll have the panelists keep addressing these questions while the presentation is on as well. So we can try and take a couple of these questions while the session is on. And we'll also try and come back to these. For those of you who are on our Facebook group, we'll also try and pick up a couple of questions from there and have our panelists answer these questions for you here. So
taking some time to load. Yeah. Can you see the presentation, Pallavi?
Yes, we can see your slides, Mansa.
Great. So I'm going to talk about classroom communication as having 2 facets. The conversations that go on in a classroom in my mind, there are two distinct facets. One is the academic side, and the other is the affective domain. I'm going to take up the academic conversations that happen in the classroom, and then we move on to, of course, the affective, the social, emotional conversations that we have in our classrooms. So traditionally, we teachers are supposed to be in the business of imparting knowledge, giving information. That's not true. We actually should be in the business of gathering information. That must be the primary activity of a teacher in a classroom, is to be able to gather as much information as possible through various formative processes, so that she knows and understands all the students in a classroom and can feed all that into the teaching learning process to make the learning effective. So we are actually in the business of gathering information, and more so, not just gathering, but understanding the many ways that this information can be used to make our classrooms, teaching learning processes, a success. We talking about conversations that happen in the classroom, and Hattie and Timperley, way back in 2007, spoke about these conversations in the form of the feedback that happens in the classroom, and the feedback being one of the most important ways that a teacher can make her processes robust. Research constantly ranks feedback as one of the strongest interventions at teachers' disposal. So how do we use all this information that we gather in our classrooms on a daily basis for every individual students and also collectively? How do we use this information to start meaningful conversations in the class? And building up on what John Hattie spoke about, Douglas Fisher and Nancy Frey actually built on that and said that these conversations that happen in the classrooms are actually the 360 feedback process that happens, and it has primarily three components: feed up, feedback, and feed forward. When we talk of feed up, when teachers have conversations with students, specifying clarifying the short-term learning outcomes, as well as talking about the ultimate learning goals, when these are the kind of conversations that teachers have with their students, it is feed up. Communicating clearly defined outcomes to the student is actually critical to effective learning. For example, when it's clear that the purpose of the unit is to compare insects and arthropods, students know what to expect, and the teacher also can design the reading, the collaborative projects, the research, the various kinds of assessments to ensure that the students remain focused on the learning outcomes. So this is feed up. What you understand by feedback? Feedback are the kind of conversations that a teacher has with a student on a one-on-one basis. When she this is one of the most common processes, most common components that the teachers use in the classroom. The teacher communicates to the students as to where they are in the developmental continuum, specifies the progress towards the goal, and suggests actions that they can possibly take to fill in those gaps. So this is where the student is made aware of their areas of success, and their areas of improvement are highlighted. This is where the students can have meaningful conversations with teachers, where they both are looking at the progress made and the gaps that need to be taken care of. For example, I mean, you want them to write a narrative essay, and you've told them how to different types of different great ways of beginning a narrative essay. For example, you could start it with a quote. You could start with a question. You could start your writing with a startling statistic or something, and then you look at each of the essays and give personalized feedback to each student. So that is one more way of having a conversation with the students. Now, what do we understand by feed forward? So this is a particular area is often neglected by teachers. This is where all the gathered data or information is used by the teacher to plan for the future instruction, hence the name feed forward. As teachers look at student work using any of the formative activities that you might be doing in your classroom, and then they use this info to gather to fine-tune their teaching processes. For example, you've taught a word problem, and you in math, and you realize that 80% of the students don't really understand, have not really understood the word problem. Obviously, this is a clear message to the teacher that either she needs to reteach it, or she has to drastically change her strategy of teaching. And this is precisely where the teacher could have conversation with students to contribute to this feed forward process by telling you what is it they think can improve the instruction in the classroom. Do they want to look at another video? Do they want to be helped, given some more sites to sort of add to their research process? So these are the three areas of feedback that the teachers can have different kinds of conversations with their students to actually augment the effective learning processes in the classroom. Also, one of the things which which Brianna also spoke about, and is the power of questioning. We just saw how through just asking relevant questions, they could place the student or the learner at a particular point in the continuum. So in my opinion, I think we own we owe every development, every invention in history to the human power of questioning. If we didn't ask questions, I don't think we would have progressed where we are. I mean, I'm sure we looked at the birds that were flying and said, I wonder how they fly, and today we are flying in the sky, and I'm sure we looked at the fish in the water and said, I wonder how they swim, and then we did figure it out. So I think questioning is the starting point for any learning process, any educational process. Questioning is an art, it's a science. Teachers must be really good at being able to ask questions. So we we are again going back to our good old friend, Mr. Bloom, and talk about how it is good to ask not just any questions, but if you want to raise the bar of the conversations that you have in your classroom, you need to ask questions which are higher order, which are from the top of Bloom's taxonomy: evaluatory questions, application-based questions, creativity questions. Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins, two wonderful gentlemen who came up with this brilliant idea of understanding by design. It's a framework that they designed, which talks about designing backwards and talking about the importance of assessments. So I won't get into that, but what I want to tell you this is that they talk about the importance of questioning. They said teachers should not just simply march through textbooks, not just be in the sole goal should not be just to complete the syllabus, but the whole class should be asked questions like, can you use what you have learned in a novel situation? Can you explain what you have learned in your own words? Can you actually teach whatever you've learned to somebody else? Those are the kinds of questions that we need to ask in our classrooms to actually get conversations going, which will open doors to more and more questions coming in, more and more research, and make the learning process really fun and also at the same time interesting. So one of the things that we need to have in our classrooms is teachers really questioning a lot, and at the same time giving opportunities, those little pockets to students to be able to question you as well. It's a great idea also to have to question children's questions. For example, if a kid comes to you and says, ma'am, is this the right answer? What do you think is the answer to this? You can turn right back and say, what do you think? And then when he gives you the answer, you can again and asks you, ma'am, do you think this is the right answer? You can again turn around and say, what do you think? So actually this whole process of questioning their questions also raises the level of the teaching learning that is happening in our classroom. And this is what we are talking about when we talk about bringing in 21st century skills of critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity. This is exactly what we are talking about. So we now, a lot of times we are talking of putting children into groups, getting them to do pair work, getting them to do small group work, and we are being asked to encourage discussions. Now, a lot of teachers say that the classrooms become pretty noisy, and a lot of objection might be raised by the neighboring classrooms, and the principal might walk in, or one of those things. So one of the great strategies to use is right from the beginning, right from the primary classes, train our students to speak at various voice levels. You can see the chart, little chart here, where there are about 5 levels of voice levels that the students can use in their classroom. Spy talk is when you're doing pair work and you need to keep your voice down so only your neighbor can hear you. Low flow, small group work, so that only the 4 of you who are part of the group can hear each other. Formal normal is normal conversation. A loud crowd is when you have been asked to present something to the whole class, or you giving an extempore speech or whatever. And then of course there's the playground voice where you can just let go. So we actually need to train our children, our students, to use the right level of voice that matches the activity. And this way we will be able to have collaborative work which is productive, which is not disruptive. And and I have seen this work beautifully in classrooms where the students are immediately they understand what is the voice level that you need to maintain to sort of do that particular activity. We move to the affective facet of classroom conversations, conversations that teachers have with their students or students have with each other. So I came across this really amazing ingenious idea in a blog that I read a few years back, and this was really wanted to share it with you. Every Friday afternoon, this particular teacher who wrote the blog, I don't remember her name, but she would ask her students to write down the names of 4 children whom she'd like, who they would like to sit with in the following week. So she would ask the children to write down 4 names of their peers, and then the children knew that their requests may or may not be honored. And then she also asked the students to nominate one student whom they believed has an exceptional class citizen quality and could be elected as the class citizen of that week. And then all the ballots were put in the box. Now, every single Friday afternoon, after the students went home, the teacher would take out these slips from the box and place them in front of her and study them. And what was she looking for? She was looking for patterns that would answer questions like, who is not getting requested by anyone else? Who doesn't even know who to request? Who never gets noticed enough to be nominated? Who has no friends this week? You see, the teacher was actually not looking for a new seating plan or wanted to give a badge to the exceptional citizen. She was actually looking for children who were struggling to connect with others. She was trying to identify those who were falling through the cracks of the class social life. She was actually trying to find out who were the ones who were being neglected, ignored, who were the ones who were being bullied, who are the ones who were bullying. So every weekend, it was like studying an X-ray of the classroom to see beneath the surface of things and actually take a peek into the hearts of the students. I think this is what we need to do. The teacher, it is absolutely extremely important to keep that finger on the social, emotional pulse of the classroom. Of course, this teacher did it with little chits. You can do it digitally also now. You can see the URL on the page, equitymaps.com, and it's a iPad app that enables teachers to track small or large group conversations, to produce data about student behavior, and the core idea is the same. It's very simple, based on the old group discussion concept of, you know, passing the yarn from one speaker to the next, so that by the end the group actually sees a web of yarn connecting one speaker to the other, often showing gaps where the students didn't participate, and also highlighting those who may have kind of dominated the conversation. So you can go and check out this app. Each student in the app is displayed as an icon. As the group discussion flows, the teacher taps the icon of each new speaker, and the lines appear and the web gets created. The data that is demonstrated in the equity maps is based on the number of students who participated, how much they participated. You can even make out whether the girls spoke more or the boys spoke more, and things like that. So please go and check out this. You can do it, this kind of emotional mapping, equity mapping digitally as well. One of the other things that I would like to talk about is that the conversations that we have in our classroom with the students. We spoke of letting them know the academic goals and the learning outcomes. It is also important, very important, to let them know your expectations in terms of behavior in your classroom. It is my opinion, you don't have to be their friend. They have their own friends in school and at home. You need to be friendly. They don't need a friend. They are looking for an adult to provide that framework, that guidance, that support to help them through these rocky times, especially teenagers. So it is essential to understand that the difference between punishment and discipline. When you resort to punishment, you are giving a message that as an adult, you can't manage yourself, let alone managing the kid in question. So discipline, on the other hand, is actually having conversations, positive conversations with students, teaching them to recognize and control their behavior, and actually making them responsible for their actions. How adults, how we as teachers respond to their actions, the conversations that we have, shapes how the kids feel, behave, interact with others in the future. It actually shapes the kind of adults that they will become. So punishments, whether they are physical or psychological, they actually are very, very detrimental. They focus on the past. Discipline actually is a process. It's not a single act, and therefore it teaches them to be responsible for their own actions. And it is absolutely essential to have conversations with your kids. Let them make the rules. Let them talk to you about the consequences that they would like to see. Let them think of the procedure, and let them have a democratic process, democratic conversations in your classroom, so that all together can decide what is allowed in the classroom and what is not allowed, not just in the classroom, but in the school as well. So these are the kind of conversations it's imperative that teachers have with their students to build that kind of connect, that kind of rapport that you really need, especially in times like these. So we need to remember the things that just to me are extremely important when we have when we are communicating in our classroom, is try as far as possible to speak less and give more time for students to speak. More student talk time and less teacher talk time. Also, embrace mistakes. In fact, let the students know through your body language, through your conversations with them, that mistakes are not opposite to success, but they are stepping stones to success. So mistakes should be part of the teaching learning process in the classroom. And last, we must look inwards. As teachers, as human beings, we all have biases. We have all kinds of strange biases. At times we don't even realize how these biases come out. We need to look inwards and really recognize these biases. I remember personal experience. I remember my daughter's grades in physics were plummeting, and I went to the teacher, and this gentleman told me, ma'am, normally what happens is that girls are pretty weak in maths and physics. Now I was pretty shocked to get this from a teacher, and he didn't mean any harm. It was, of course, coming from a bias that he wasn't even aware that he had. So we as teachers must look inwards and really be aware of the biases, so that we can weed them out and have more and more positive conversation and build more and more positive spaces in our classrooms. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mansa. Thank you so much for that. I'm afraid we've run a little bit over time today. We're going to pin that squarely on Jake and his surprise visit. So participants can excuse us for running a little bit over time. But we do have time for two very quick questions, both of which have been coming up quite repeatedly. So I'm just going to pick up both of these. The first one is about engaging. How do we utilize these questioning techniques with some of the kindergarten or the pre-primary kids? So I'm going to open this out to both Brianna, Jake, as well as to Mansa. So if you'd like to take this one, Jake, about pre-primary kids and how we can actually use questioning techniques with them.
I think you need to be very deliberate when you're working with younger students. I've had the opportunity to teach 6-year-olds this year for the first time. And so I know how difficult it can be and how clear you need to communicate. And I think modeling conversation is really important. So if there's a teacher walking past in the hallway, pull them into your classroom and model the type of conversation you want the students to have. And then go have them ask someone else in the class the same question that you just modeled with the teacher. Or of course you could use a student, but I think the students think it's pretty fun when you pull in another teacher and they see you talking to another teacher, showing them what you expect.
Absolutely.
And I think questioning is a very natural process. I think if you look at I think children are the ones who ask the maximum number of questions. That's part of the humanity, where maximum questions prop up when they are small kids. So it is questioning comes very naturally to them, and I think as long as you don't baby talk, but talk to them at the grade level language and give them suitable sort of answers, I think it works the same way that it would work at any other level.
Right. There is one other question that's come up quite a lot in the chat as well as in the Q&A box, which is, what do we do about kids who don't like talking? So I'm going to ask Brianna to take that, because I know, Brianna, you touched upon this in the presentation as well. So over to you.
There's a couple different things you can try, but students who are reluctant to engage in a group conversation or even a teacher-student conversation are often more inclined to have a conversation with another child if it's just one-on-one, and I would put them with the right other student in their class, someone who could really encourage them and would be patient with their responses. But you also might find that a student who's reluctant to speak is happy to engage in a written conversation, whether that's, I'm going to write on a whiteboard and hold up my whiteboard, and you're going to write a response on your whiteboard and hold that up, or we're going to be in a shared document online, or we're going to be in a chat. We can build a conversation in a variety of ways, and you're touching on a lot of the same skills no matter what modality you're using.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for us also as educators to understand that communication isn't just about talking. And by talking, I mean spoken communication. Children communicate in a variety of ways. Kids can also communicate when they're slouched in their chairs, but they can also communicate when they're really, really perky and attentive. So it's not just about things that are said, but a lot of the stuff that's unsaid as well. And for the kids who are not talking a lot, I think it's important for us as teachers to be able to pick up on things that they're not saying, particularly things like body language or things that we can pick up otherwise in their conversations with their friends and so on. Okay.
I'll just say one more tip though. I've just actually spoken to another teacher who's using puppet shows as if it's not me that's speaking, and you can actually do a really nice Zoom puppet show. So it's not something that I've personally used with my students, but it might be worth a shot if you look for something else to engage. I don't even care if we're talking 16-year-olds or 6-year-olds. You might want to give it a try.
That sounds like a really interesting idea. Teachers, if any of you actually try that puppet show, please let us know. Send it to us, share it on the Facebook group, and most certainly share it with Jake and Brianna as well. Okay, so on that note, we're going to call today's conversation to a close. Thank you so much, Brianna, Jake, and Mansa, for this amazing talking about talking, this talk about talking that we had today. And it was fantastic to hear your insights into getting students talking, into how teachers should talk to the students, and how positive conversations and dialogue can be initiated in the classroom. So thank you all three of you for being here with us today. Participants, thank you all so much for the fantastic questions that you put out. It was amazing to see all the great things that you're thinking about when you're thinking about talking. I just very quickly want all of you to take note of the Google form that's coming up in your chat now. This will take you, this is the feedback form. You can use this to submit just feedback if you don't want to request a certificate for today's session. If you do want to apply for a certificate, the same form has everything you need right there. The form will also automatically pop up once this session closes, and will also be emailed to those of you who may have left the session early or have missed catching it in the chat. So there we are. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, thank you, Jake. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Mansa. Thank you, participants, for being here today. And we will catch you once again next Friday to talk to you all about how is it that we can actually look at community learning and service action while we are in remote classrooms. So that coming up next week. Stay tuned, and we'll see you all. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you all.